Hi, in this tutorial, we will see how to build a REST web services using Springboot and Java. So what is REST? Before even going to REST, what is a web service? Web service is a standardized way to propagate communication between the client and the server applications on the World Wide Web. It means you can say it's a way of communication between the front end and back end, or there can be multiple services on the back end which will communicate with each other. Instead of having a big monolithic application, it can be divided into simple services, and these services can communicate with each other using the web service protocols. So the client is your computer or your phone, and they will be communicating to the backend server using the web service calls. As I said, you use protocols to communicate between services. Generally, there are two different protocols that we have in the industry right now. They are SOAP and REST. SOAP is Simple Object Access Protocol, and as it says, it is a protocol. It follows a protocol. It accepts only XML data and can only transfer XML data, and there needs to be a certain definitions made, predefined before even using the services. Whereas REST is called representational state transfer. It's not even a protocol. There are no protocols. You can transfer any kind of data like text, JSON, or XML data, or even a file format data. You can transfer any kind of data between services. There are basically 4 different methods that we use in the REST web services or any web services. They're get, post, put, and delete. Get is basically used to retrieve the existing data. Let's say you have user data already existing, and if you want to retrieve the data for user 1, you will use the get call to make the to get the data. And post is used to create or insert new data. That means if you want to add a new user, you will use a post method to insert new user data. And put method is used to update the existing data. That means if you want to update user 1 data, like if you want to change his location or his status, you will basically use put call to make that change. And delete method, as it says, is used to delete the existing data. If you want to delete a user data, you will be using a delete call. You can ask me like, can I use get call and either post or update or delete the data? Yes, you can use get call and pass request parameters and make those changes, but it's not the standard. So you should be using get to retrieve the data, post to insert new data, put method to update the data, and delete method to delete the data. So in this tutorial, I will be using Spring Tool Suite, which is basically Eclipse, and I will be building the web services using Java and Maven build tool. So I would like to have you these ready installed before I step into it. I have my Spring Tool Suite open here. Let's go ahead and create the Springboot application. Go to File, New, and Other. When you go here, if you see here, you see the Springboot here. So I'll go ahead and do the Spring Starter project. So it's a default location and the demo project. The group ID is this, and it's going to be a Maven project, and the packaging will be jar. So it will be using Springboot version 2.2.2. It's the latest version. And I'll go next. And that's it. Finished. So if you see this REST demo 1, go to the pom.xml. It conveniently added me all the properties. The Java version 1.8 and the dependencies which I needed, that is the Springboot starter and the starter test and the Springboot Maven plugin. This Springboot Maven plugin collects all the jars in the class path and builds a single jar, which makes it convenient to execute and transport yourself. There will be cases where your project will have like multiple modules and multiple jars included. So when you have this plugin included, build plugin, it collects all those jars from the individual modules and package that into a single executable jar. What this build plugin does is it looks for the main class and starts the Spring Boot application from there. Let's go ahead, and if you see here, so it already created a class REST demo 1 application. And if you look at this Spring Boot application annotation, so this is the annotation we will be defining to let the build plugin see, hey, here is the Spring Boot application and we are supposed to start this application. So this Spring Boot annotation, it's very convenient. If you worked on Spring MVC, you might know that you have to give like 3 annotations: configuration, enable auto configuration, and component scan. These 3 annotations should be given. The configuration tags the class as a source of bean definitions in the application context. And this annotation enable auto configuration tells Spring Boot to start adding beans based on class path. And this component scan tells the Spring to look for other components, configurations, and services in the package. So now with this single Spring Boot application annotation, we no longer don't have to give these annotations. Yep. So now I will go ahead and create the controller from here. The REST controller, actually our endpoints will be there. I'll go ahead and create a package. I will name it as user controller. Controller. It is supposed to show. Let us go back to pom.xml. And I see there is one more dependency missing here. That's Springboot MVC, where the REST controller is part of. So I added the Springboot starter web dependency. Now, if you go back here and try to do the REST controller, there you go. So we define this as a REST controller. And in this REST controller, we will be adding a function public, which returns a string for now, get user details. So this function we will be using to get the user details. From get. So we define this controller as a REST controller, but we also need to define this function as the endpoint for a get method. So we have one more annotation called get mapping, which says, hey, this is a get call, and we will define the endpoint as get user details. So when we are calling, we will be calling with this endpoint to get the user details. So to quickly see this, how this get method is working, we will configure the run configurations. So we will do the run configurations, and we will do the Spring Boot app. We will name it as run demo, and it already took the main class, and the project is rest demo-1, and I will apply and run this. So the Tomcat started at port 8080. Let's open my Postman here. So I have the get method. I use the localhost 8080, and the endpoint I'm supposed to use is this. There you go. If you see, it is returning the string that we defined here, hello from get. So it's working. That's it. You had the web service up and running. But is this any useful? No. So we will define the other methods for post, put, and delete as well using the same endpoint. We can use the same endpoint but with a different method. Let me copy this quickly. So like get mapping, we also have post mapping, put mapping, and delete mapping, right? We'll change this to create new user, update user, delete user. We will also change the endpoints because the name doesn't make any sense. So I will change this endpoint to create user, update user, delete user, right? hello from delete, hello from put, hello from post. All right, let's see how it's working. I'm going to stop this and run again. So let's go back to Postman. This is hello from get. Change this to create user. Hello from post. Update user. Hello from put. And delete user. Hello from delete. Hola. It's working. So now let's pass some parameters. So there are basically three types of passing parameters through an endpoint. That's through path parameters, which we can pass like the name here and age of a person and location of a person right here. Or you can pass them as headers like name, age, and location. So let's go ahead and create a person object. New package dot object. The person object, and let's say private. So I will also create some getters and setters for this. There you go. And I will create a constructor object which takes in all the fields and assigns. There you go. It's created here. I want to move this to top. There you go. I will also create an empty constructor. Person. There you go. That's it. Now we will use this person object when we are creating a user or updating a user or deleting a user based on the name or any particular ID. We will use name in this case. So when you're trying to get the details, you need to pass the name of the person and it will return that person's details. So how do you pass the parameters? You can pass the parameters using the request headers, as I said. So you can add the name here as Raj and it will try to find this person. Let's see what happens. I still don't have the request header to accept the request headers. So let's send and see what it says. See, it says 404 not found, which it doesn't find the get method which accepts the header name. So let's go ahead and add it. So in order to accept the header, we have an annotation called request header, and you can define the type of the variable here, string name, and it will get the name. If I go ahead and do the same thing, see, there you go. It says hello from get. Requesting details of user, and I'll give the name passed, which makes it started. Let's go ahead and do this. There you go. Requesting details for user, and get the space here, Raj. So let's do the same thing for creating the new user, which will insert the new user data. I'll change this object to person object instead of that. And in the request, so for post method, you can send request header as well, but ideally you will send the details of the person in the body. So I'll headers and how we can create a person using the request header parameters. Request header name, request header age, header location. So this method will accept 3 header parameters: name, age, and location. I know age should be ideally is integer, but for our convenience, let's take it as string. So here we changed this return type to person. So now it's complaining. What we'll do is we will return a new person of name, age, and location. There you go. Nice. We'll stop this. Run again. So we'll use the post method, and the headers, I have name already there, age 30, location Dallas, right? So let's see what happens. The endpoint is create user. There you go. It created a new person object, returned me that object. So ideal scenario, we will take this new person object and we will be persisting into the database. That we will look into that in the next video. But for now, I just returned a new person object, creating it here. It's not a convenient way. Let's say if the person object has like 100 different variables in it, you can't add 100 variables into the headers. For that reason, we will compile all these variables into single person object or a JSON format and pass it, and we will typecast here. So in order to send that in a body, we need to accept the request body and the type as person and person. If the number of variables you send in the JSON are same, and if the type of those variables are similar to what person object has, Java, the Springboot does the typecasting automatically. You don't have to take care of any of that. And I would just return the person back. All right. Stop it here again. So instead of me sending this, I'll send the body. There you go. Raw type. Actually, it's the response earlier what we saw. And this is a JSON format. And we need to change it to JSON. Send it. There you go. If you see here, it returned the person object that we sent. To see it, actually, it's being typecast. Let's do one more change here. Person returning. Let me return something like created new user space and person get name. See, this time it returned me created new user Raj. So you sent a JSON format, but Spring was able to typecast it to person object, and when I'm trying to get person.getName, it returned me the name that I sent there. Looks pretty neat. Now let's go and do the same thing for the update user and delete user. I'll be passing returning the string here. I don't want to change the return type here. So let's go ahead and accept the request body person. So we'll start with the get user details. So see, it is expecting a request header called name, and we are sending a body here. Let's go ahead and add that name here. Try to send it. There you go, requesting details for user Raj. So now try the post method. Create user, which has a body. Let's send it. Create a new user Raj. Let's make it David. There you go, create a new user for David. And we will test the put method, which is update user. See, updated user David. delete user. It says method not allowed. Oh, so if you see here, the error message says method not allowed. I'm trying to call this endpoint delete user with the put method, but what we defined here is actually a delete mapping for this particular endpoint delete user. So it won't allow a put method to do that operation. So we will do the delete. There you go, deleted user David. So we covered these 4 different kinds of methods with the different endpoints. In the next video, we will actually look into how to persist this data, and we will do some CRUD operations in the next video. And we will also discuss about the HTTP responses. So if you have observed, see, it says status 200 OK, and when I used put method, it sent a different response, status 405. We will look into all those HTTP status messages and how you can customize them when you're returning it back in the next video. Thank you.